Hi students, I thought I'd give you just a little background in library history as well as some important documents that you'll need to know about in the profession. So let's take a look back at a little school library history. I love these old posters and maybe you can use those in your library. The link is there if you like. A quote interested me, one that I found a long time ago, and it's also included in your textbook. Mary E. Hall was only the second person appointed as a high school librarian in the United States. And her description of the high school library just reminds me so much of what mine looked like. To realize what we mean by a modern high school library, one must actually see it in action. Even the high school librarian who spends her days year in and year out in the library feels each day the fascination and wonder of it all. To have as your visitors each day from 5 to 700 boys and girls of all nationalities and all stations of life, to see them come eagerly crowding in, 100 and more every 40 minutes, and to realize that for 4 of the most important years of their lives, it is the opportunity of the library to have a real and lasting influence upon each individual boy and girl, gives the librarian a feeling that her calling is one of high privilege and great responsibility. Wow, doesn't that describe a good situation, and one that many of us have experienced, I hope, and will experience? In fact, back in 1915, as I said, Mary was one of very few, maybe 2 librarians. At that point, schools had book rooms and libraries that really didn't have librarians. Although teachers who were getting stability in terms of grade level and subject areas were building classroom collections. So we didn't have very many librarians. We didn't have library standards either. The first that I know about happened in 1945, was published by ALA's Committee on Post-War Planning, and it links school library effectiveness to the size of its book collections and frequency of classroom teachers' use. The school librarian was beginning to be seen as an instructional leader for the mental, emotional, and social growth of young people. As we move into 1960, we see AASL standards for school library programs. It's the first of our modern group of standards, and it specified collaborative leadership responsibilities. And this may have been inspired by the impact of Sputnik, the Cold War, the race to space, and our new interest in really ensuring that our students were capable in learning math and science and languages. And then 1969 brought us a focus on media. The ASL and the Department of Audiovisual Instruction brought us the standards for school media programs. Also, out of that emerged the term School Library Media Specialist and School Library Media Center. Again, there was a focus on leadership and also public relations and administrative ability. The document proposed that the standards be revised every couple of years. In 1975, with collaboration from the Education, Communications, and Technology organization, we see a critical shift, and the school library is now an integral part of the total instructional program of the school, which focuses on school librarians as teachers. And then this was the first year I entered the school library part of our profession, and I encountered information power. And here we have that mission that we see resonates in the documents to come. The mission of the School Library Media Program is to ensure that students and staff are effective users of ideas and information. And it talks about how that mission is accomplished by providing physical access, instruction, and working with other educators to design learning strategies, the collaboration part of it. And so the 3 roles were established: information consultant, instructional consultant, and teacher. In 1998, 10 years later, we see a new information power with a focus on partnerships and an introduction of 9 information literacy standards in 3 categories: information literacy, independent learning, and social responsibility. And then we hit empowering learners. And I'm going to skip to the next slide to show you the cover. This is AASL's Learning Standards for 2007, and it calls on the school librarian to function as an educational leader and suggests that the learning standards shape the library program as a tool for school librarians to shape the learning of students in the entire school. In the mission statement here, we see the same mission that was introduced back in 1988. The mission of the school library media program is to ensure that students and staff are effective users of ideas and information. And the school library media specialist empowers students to be critical thinkers, enthusiastic readers, and skillful researchers in the ways that are listed below. The standards also came with a set of common beliefs. These are kind of overarching across the standards, and you should really know about these. They cover, of course, reading and inquiry and ethical behavior, technology skills, equitable access, information literacy, thinking skills, the social context, and the essential aspect of school librarians in the learning community. Of course, these standards documents also recognize the various elements of the library program. It's not just the librarian, it's not just the students, but you'll see these in all the standards documents as they move forward. Instruction is center, and you can't do that without a learning space, whether it's digital or physical, whether there's a budget and advocacy. Those two things go together, as you'll see in our course. Collection and access, and staffing, of course. Let's take a look at other things that are changing. If you look back to where we began this lecture, libraries have changed a lot. And these new documents that we're looking at recognize the changes. The school library is a learning environment, and you can see the changes. And around 2009, the standards themselves are changing a bit. One of the things the recent sets of standards did was survey the membership of AASL to see what they thought of their jobs were, the major roles. Remember way back we saw there were 3 roles that were listed in information power. Well, we're moving into the 2000s documents, and we're seeing that there's a move from teacher, information specialist, instructional partner, and program administrator to see that the major role, where it was before teacher, the major role is this collaborative role of instructional partner. Another thing that's changing is the notion of some type of systematic symmetry across the programs, that strategic planning is important, that it's important to set policies and procedures, that advocacy is becoming more and more important in the 2000s. Funding issues have started. They, believe it or not, they started way earlier than the last few years that you're seeing, and the notion of flexible access. And as a result of that, we see the emergence of yet another document, the last one, Standards for the 21st Century Learner in 2007, was followed by Empowering Learners in 2009, which goes back into those roles and clarifies them. And in 2009, we see the role of leader emerging as important, and it wasn't in the previous documents. And so that is something that this course is largely about, your leadership. The description of the book, at the beginning of the book, Empowering Learners, as we approach the second decade of the 21st century, school library media programs continue to undergo momentous changes that have heightened the importance of technology and evidence-based learning. The focus has moved from the library as a confined place to one with fluid boundaries that is layered by diverse needs and influenced by an interactive global community. Guiding principles for school library media programs must focus on building a flexible learning environment with the goal of producing successful learners skilled in multiple literacies. Empowering Learners advances school library media programs to meet the needs of the changing school library environment and is guided by the standards for 21st century learners. And so we're beginning to see this recognition of the power of ubiquitous access and the technologies to reach our customers and users. And then the mission changes around 2014. The American Association of School Librarians empowers leaders to transform teaching and learning. I did a number of articles around that period, and it was that particular mission statement made me feel like I could do anything. And I want you to feel the same way. You are a leader. You can transform teaching and learning. And so to keep that mission in mind. In 2017, at the AASL meeting, we launched the new standards document, and it was the National School Library Standards. And it was interesting because it approached the standards in 3 different ways, and I'll show you in a second. The National Standards document established this structure. As I mentioned, there was the learner competencies, the librarian competencies, and the school library competencies. And so those involved domains. These are related to learning theory. There's the domain of thinking, creating, sharing, and growing, which you may have heard many times librarians share that. And within each of those domains, and those are within the frameworks, you have the shared foundations. And these are what the foundations look like. We often refer to them as ICE. Inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage. The shared foundations are described with key commitments. And you look at this chart carefully, you'll see that each of these are defined. Now, within the various different learning standards, as we look at them more closely, you'll see these definitions are explored in specific situations, in specific learner settings, and we'll take a good look at that in a couple of our mods, and you'll be able to attach some of the language of the standards to that. This table, and you'll find them across the national standards in both in the first edition and then the second edition, which we're looking at more specifically this semester. You'll find the language as a combination of numbers and letters. In this case, we're looking at the shared foundation, inquire, and we're looking at the second domain, which is create, and the third competency within that domain. So in this case, we'd assign the number, the 1B3, and that describes a situation in which learners engage with new knowledge by following a process that includes generating products that illustrate learning. That kind of notation is often included in an instructional plan, and you might include that with the instructional, the standards from your partners, your classroom teacher or subject domain partners. And so you might include both something from the Next Generation Science standards as well as your own standards as you plan lessons together in the sciences. And speaking of connecting with teachers who are not librarians, one of the things that AASL has done, and a number of other people have done on their own, is to create crosswalks. So you can see symmetry or alignment between the National School Library Standards and the standards and national standards of the various different domains. One thing that the first edition of the standards had that the second doesn't is personas. I do want to mention them because personas are really helpful in action planning or strategic planning. We'll be using them even though they're not included in the second edition, and I'll be presenting you with some information on how we might use them effectively. There's an awful lot of material on the standards portal, and I hope you'll visit it frequently. There is a poster relating to the standards that you can print out, and more stuff as they build on the second edition. More and more content will be added to the standards portal. And speaking of the second edition, that is the book I'm currently holding, and that was introduced at the St. Louis conference in October of 2025. If you think about the first edition and the second edition, imagine like you have a sturdy print atlas, that a map that you need to navigate, and there was a lot of content and detail in that about how you might do that. The second edition you might think of as using your GPS in the car. It maintains those maps, but then it adds some real life situations, which might be educational trends or issues that you face. And then it may provide some voice generated directions to help you understand the grade band levels, and a dashboard to track your performance, which would be some of the administrator tools that are included in the second edition. Here is a slide that talks about, this is based on a Knowledge Quest article by Laura Hicks and Charity Pennington. And what it does is describe the changes between the first edition and the second edition. And as I noted earlier, the second edition is more aligned with modern trends. It is a big response to practitioner feedback that wanted more practical situations, kind of case study approaches, what you would do in a particular situation. It also is an advocacy tool for reinforcing the librarian's value. It has actionable practices. It focuses more on literacy, inquiry, digital citizenship, collaboration, and culturally responsive practices, which were introduced in the first but are far more explicit in the second edition. It has a suite of implementation tools, including tables, practice examples, updated rubrics, templates, and advocacy scenarios. And it has new resources to help administrators understand the librarian's role and their impact. So there's a good section on planning, and there are some wonderful tools that you can sit down with your administrator and discuss as you plan for your own growth. There was also a great, I think it was Appendix H in the first edition, that is still very usable, but this one is enhanced and more modernized. I want to mention some other AASL tools while we're on the subject of AASL. I think it's really important to keep up with the wonderful selection of digital tools that are selected each year. It used to be separated by apps and websites for teaching and learning, and now there's a combined committee. I was on it for several years, but now it's combined, and it's called the Best Digital Tools, and I look forward to it every year as it comes out in the June conference. Another wonderful set of tools that AASL publishes are their toolkits and position statements. They'll be integrated throughout the course, and they're on our school library headquarters LibGuide. When you don't know how to do something, when you need a justification to defend something, these toolkits will generally be lifesavers. And we have them listed very clearly, and I integrate them through the course. You may also want to promote something that you're doing with and try to go for an award. There's a long list of awards and grants. They are not inaccessible. In fact, sometimes people don't apply for them. And while you're also applying, say, for the local PTO grant or something from Dollar General, really consider also the grants that AASL presents. And if you're doing any independent research or action research, apply for a research grant. This is just a graphic that kind of expands on that a little bit and gives you the various types of awards that are available. And don't forget, your local state awards are also accessible to you. Don't forget also Knowledge Quest. That's the journal of the American Association of School Librarians. It's also a blog. Some of our former students are bloggers for Knowledge Quest. You can do it too. The blogs are organized by topic, and there's some wonderful advice. Very often I'll include a Knowledge Quest blog post on our reading lists, but go through them on your own as you need them. Another note about standards. Your standards, as I mentioned, can be integrated and aligned with other standards. We noticed the crosswalks a little earlier, but a couple of them I want to point to more specifically, aside from the social studies English. and science and art, music and health. There's loads of standards you can connect to. And sometimes going beyond the core standards, you can make some wonderful friends in art and health and special ed. But I did want to mention the ISTE standards and these are the technology standards. There are sets of standards for students, for educators, for educational leaders, and for coaches. You can very easily align with these. In fact, very often I see that the educational leaders and coaches standards really overlap with the kind of work that we're doing as school librarians. But those technology leaders in your school, you want to be connected with them. You want to raise your hand and be involved in their meetings. You want a seat at the table. Understanding the ISTE standards will help you with that. A second set that I think are important that go beyond those content area standards are the Future Ready School standards. These were developed. I'm going to actually show you a little bit of a video, but many schools have taken the Future Ready pledge. And so if you're in one of those schools, connecting with your administrators and showing them that you're rowing in the same direction and that you have the same standards and yours are interpreted for librarians, but you really supporting their work can be really helpful in building an ally. These standards have also evolved over time. They were first introduced in 2016, evolved in 2020, and were just revised and introduced also at the AASL conference in St. Louis in 2025. I wanted to show you just a little bit about how those standards.
We're really excited to share The Wait is Over
Shannon Miller,
and the future.
And I'm going to start it a little further down the line.
The first thing is to think about how this has evolved over time. From 2016 with the first framework, and then in 2020, we made the first additions and changes, and now in 2025, where we have 3.0. The first is in literacies, and it went from literacy to literacies, and we want to make sure that it included things like news and media and AI literacies, and all the ways that we empower students with critical thinking and just ways to access, evaluate, and create information. The next is in that data and privacy wedge, and we added promotes the ethical use of research, AI, and literacies, and this goes along with how we advocate for student privacy. Now we move to use of space and time, and this is where we design collaborative spaces as librarians, but we wanted to make sure that it included how we really reimagine these flexible, creative, and inclusive spaces, and that they are a hub for not only innovation, but also wellness and partnership across the entire school community. Now we move on to collaborative leadership, and this is where we lead beyond the library. And we wanted to make sure to include leadership beyond the library, how librarians lead system change and how they work to align their goals with district priorities and also inspiring innovation. I'm really excited about what we've added to the curriculum instruction and assessment. And this is the one that already had 3 different edges of the wedge, but now we have added guides responsible use of artificial intelligence and teaching that human side of AI, helping our students and our educators use AI responsibly and creatively, transparently, and ensuring equity, ethics, and understanding in every learning space.
As you can see, the Future Ready framework is a great addition to our own national standards because it really gives us a kind of lens on the other folks who are stakeholders in our district and how we can partner with them. And I do want to just mention that among our learning playlists are things like this. This one is about standards and frameworks, which includes all the standards for the content area. So if you want to have a handy way to kind of peek at these as you connect with the teachers in your building, this should help you. Okay, I know this was a rather long little lecture. I just wanted to give you some context for where we were at the beginning of the school librarianship at the earlier part of this century and where we're going right now, and that you have tools to guide you as you plan with your partner teachers, and also that second edition of the national standards is also a very good planning tool. So both of those editions really help you and will help you with the strategic planning we're doing in this class. And I do hope you dig in deeply to them, and I'll see you in Canvas.